Welcome to Israel Q&A, a series by Bridges for Peace, Canada, where Reverend Donald James answers the difficult questions about Israel and the Church. Question 1. Should Christians care about Israel, and why?
Hello, friends. So, what's all the fuss about Israel in the church? I remember vividly when Pastor Mike Bickle asked that question on our visit to the International House of Prayer in Kansas City some years ago. Victoria and I were just becoming aware of Israel and our Jewish roots back then. Yes, there is quite a fuss in the church about Israel, at least in part of the church. And there are a large number of Christians who don't give Israel and the Jewish people any particular attention at all, and definitely not the Jewish roots of Christianity. There's a historical explanation for this divide in the church over Israel, and we will look at that in episode number 2. But for the growing segment of Christians who do care, here are 3 of the big reasons. First, Christians care about Israel because God cares for her, and we want to love what God loves. He chose Israel to be a holy, set-apart nation, and He has not unchosen her. Jeremiah 31 begins with God saying to Israel, "I have loved you with an everlasting love." And the same chapter ends with God saying this, "If the heavens above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth below can be explored, then I will cast off all the offspring of Israel for all that they have done." And we haven't measured or explored them yet. The second answer to why Christians should care about Israel is because the Jewish people are our spiritual parents. Salvation is of the Jews, said Jesus. Virtually the entire Bible was written by Jews. When we Gentiles put our faith in Jesus, writes Paul in Galatians 3, we become children of Abraham. When we Gentiles put our faith in Jesus, Paul writes in Romans, we become like a wild olive branch that is grafted in to the cultivated olive tree, which is Israel. And we are meant to be nourished by the sap of that tree. Notice that we haven't become Jews. Paul is clear on that, and we will talk further on that point. But we do become part of the commonwealth of Israel, part of the one new man composed of both Jew and Gentile. The Jews are our spiritual parents. The third answer to why Christians should care about Israel is because God has important plans for Israel and the Jewish people, future plans which we Gentiles will share in. And this future for Israel is already becoming visible to all who have eyes to see. Visible in the return of the Jews from a long exile to their ancient home, beginning in the late 1800s. Visible in the rebirth of the nation of Israel in 1948. Visible in the reunification of Jerusalem in 1967. So there we have a threefold answer to the question, why should Christians care about Israel? 1, because God cares about her with an everlasting love. 2, because they are our spiritual parents, and we are called to honor our parents. And lastly, because God has a future for Israel, and we see that future coming to pass in our very generation as He brings the Jews home from a long exile. That's a lot to make a fuss over.